Deadlock sucks. Well, that's what everyone's been telling you, and they weren't entirely wrong. Her chips didn't work half the time in the scenario they were supposed to be good in. Her wall was hard to throw correctly, and oftentimes baited you by leaving a gap without you even knowing it was there. And her grenade really sucked. She's a sentinel, so most people compare it to her peers, and she falls short there too. With no ability to reliably gather passive info, she can't really replace Cypher or Killjoy. And the rest of her kit isn't even all that effective at reliably stopping pushes better than any of the other sentinels. Most players came to the same conclusion. Don't play Deadlock. Me on the other hand, I took that personally. So it was time to learn all of her abilities, lab lineups and customs, and grind games on Deadlock day after day. After dozens of games and hard work, I was able to proudly say, Deadlock definitely needs buffs. Waiting for so long without Deadlock receiving any buffs was the last straw. I finally gave up on her and turned to Reyna. I mean, why would spend hours in a custom to create setups that don't work half the time when you can just click heads and heal? Weeks of emptiness passing by playing Reyna until finally, Deadlock received her first buff. Her Gravnet, her grenade, had some niche uses, but it was incredibly easy to take off, which made it nearly impossible for Deadlock to play off her own util, or even your teammates to punish the removal. And oftentimes, you would just accidentally snare yourself or your teammates, putting them in a bad spot. The buff increased the radius of the grenade significantly, and it made the snare indefinite until pulled off. It also doubled the time it took to remove the snare in the first place. This definitely made her grenade more reliable and easier to use, especially when you knew where the opponent was, as it was easier to play and swing off your own utility. Despite that, it wasn't really enough though. Her kit still had glaring holes that made her frustrating to play. My faith in Deadlock was still shattered from before, but then one day I saw something. Finally, a large set of Deadlock buffs at the start of episode 8. Riot has always wanted Deadlock to be unique from Cypher and Killjoy, so I wasn't expecting a rework to her sonic sensors or anything, but they massively upgraded it and how it currently worked. The trigger time has been cut in half from 1 second to 0.5 seconds, and this is definitely the biggest change to the ability, and it was sorely needed. With half the time gone, sonic sensors finally will reliably concuss enemies that trigger the trap. In previous patches, players could easily walk out of the concuss on reaction, leading you to never truly know if they were stunned or not when you wanted to play off your trip. Now, unless it's a Neon or a Jet, there will be a stunned enemy if they trigger your trap. The time for sonic sensors to be destroyed was also changed to 0.5 seconds from 6.5. This change is less important, but before, there was a small window where you could shoot the sensor, but still get stunned. It was really weird and frustrating. Now the activation time and the destroy time are equal. If you shoot the sensor, you will never get stunned. Also, the fact that the sonic sensor can be recalled now is nice, but it's not groundbreaking. Riot's intent was for Deadlock to be a sentinel that can more readily react to situations, so it was really awkward that she had to be so committal with her sonic sensors, while other sentinels could still pick up their util if the round didn't go the way they expected. Before the changes, players would even buy full shields over purchasing your sonic sensors. After the patch, however, I think her chips will be more consistent and flexible. Overall, I think her chips are finally usable and worth buying. But her sonic sensors weren't the only thing that was changed this patch. Barrier mesh got one change, but it was a big one. The wall length went from 6 meters to 10 meters. This change accomplishes two main things. One, it makes it much more forgiving to throw the barrier mesh out quickly and still block the area you intended, so the ease of use went way up. Two, it allows barrier mesh to be able to block off more types of areas. Place it on Breeze, for example, where a lot of areas were too wide for the old barrier mesh to be used. Now the ability is much more applicable to any area on the map, and it isn't just restricted to small confined maps. I think it's important for this ability to do its job well, because unlike Sage's wall, barrier mesh doesn't give the flexibility of verticality and like cool grim Sage walls. Barrier mesh is fairly one-dimensional, so it's important for it to be strong in its niche. Now the important question is, how strong is Deadlock after the changes? Will she be viable? Well, for ranked, I definitely think she's a lot better. Sonic sensors are a great tool in rank now Teams love to rush, and sonic sensors are a lot more reliable now, which really help Deadlock punish teams that flood out onto site. I try not to place sonic sensors where movement duelists would trigger them on entry without getting stunned, so that they hit people that are coming in second or third, or hit the movement duelist after they finish their movement ability. Deadlock is bad in slow rounds, where team plays defaults and poke and prod for openings. She just doesn't have the passive info that agents like Cypher and Killjoy have. That means it's really important to lure the enemy into committing. If you use your wall and grenade too early in ranked, you can slow the pushdown, and oftentimes they'll just rotate away, and so you can't punish them from pushing your site, which would lower your potential impact in the round. Deadlock has no rechargeable utility, so when you use your abilities, they need to accomplish something, otherwise you should have just played Viper or Sova or something like that. On attack, you're mainly focused on trying to get to post plants alive. You can set up a lot of checkmate scenarios as Deadlock and the post plants that give you a huge edge, even when outnumbered. Her problem before was that she didn't really have any util to help the team before the post plant, which is definitely a huge problem. With the change to sonic sensors being retrievable, I think this definitely helps a bit with providing some use during defaults. So like Deadlock can place your sonic sensor during the round, hold that area, and if the team pushes or you need a flank, you can retrieve your sonic sensor and still get to the post plant while having your trips available. The Gravnet now, also being a lot bigger, is helpful for executes when you combine it with a movement duelist. Gravnet covers a really large area, and an agent like Jet or Raze can fly in off your lineup to take out the caught target. These changes overall for Season 8 has really got me enjoying Deadlock now, and I definitely think she's playable in Ranked. So Deadlock is finally okay in Ranked, right? But what about the pro scene? Short answer, I think Deadlock is a side grade at most for those teams. To get into the details, you have to understand the way comps in pro look, and I'll try to break it down. So we have 5 slots to fill in pro play. First slot usually goes to a movement duelist. These are agents that are useful for breaking out of chokes. They're what help you execute on attack and retake on defense. Second is recon. You need something to help you get info during the game and make defaulting possible. Third is trips or traps. These are agents that give you continuous passive info on parts of the map, and that gives your team more freedom to rotate. Fourth is smokes. Playing without smokes is incredibly difficult on attack. If you played ranked at all, you definitely understand this. On defense, it helps with denying info and slowing down attackers as well. Those are 4 major things that are used in almost every team comp in pro play. And the 5th slot can be filled with whatever would be more beneficial on the map or that's conducive to the team's playstyle. A lot of teams have been running a second controller in that slot, but you could run double duelist or even double sentinel. Deadlock doesn't really provide any of those traditional tools, so she has to fight for that flex slot. The problem I have is, what does Deadlock do that's unique over agents that are currently being played in the flex slot? Deadlock doesn't provide any passive info, flashes, recon, or movement. Her one role is to punish players that commit to an area, but she doesn't have any tools to force opponents to push her. An agent like Viper maybe be a little bit worse at punishing opponents that commit to an area. She's still good at it while providing many other ways to show value to the team throughout the whole round with her smokes. So while I think the buffs are a step in the right direction, I think Deadlock still suffers from a similar problem that ISO does. Her individual tools are pretty good, but as a whole package, they don't provide a unique advantage over other options. So what would I change about Deadlock? Well, the first question we should ask is, what is Deadlock's design intent? Like I talked a little bit about earlier, Riot wants her to be a low setup sentinel that is able to react to situations on the fly, but very intentionally doesn't want her to be a passive flank watcher. A sentinel that is on the other side of the coin of Killjoy and Cypher. Someone who can lock down an area, but doesn't need to spend as much time in-game and out-of-game to set up. With that in mind, it does seem like they do want her to be a trap agent, but not being able to passively gather info is an important part of her identity. This is why they don't want her wall to be indefinite until destroyed, or why enemies can shift walk through her trips without alerting Deadlock. The problem I have with this design, though, is her utility is stationary, and she doesn't have a reliable way to play off her utility against players that take things slow. This means the better Deadlock's opponents are, the less she can use her utility reliably, and the more risks without her utility Deadlock has to take. She runs into a problem where she has a difficult time creating the beneficial situations for herself, which is something other agents don't struggle with nearly as much. In order for Deadlock to shine, I think her kit needs to be able to be more cohesive, so she can reliably enact a game plan that she has more control over. That's why I don't think simple number changes are going to cut it anymore. At this point, Deadlock needs new features added to her abilities or reworked abilities altogether. So what should we change? First, I think we should look at her sonic sensors. Riot really doesn't want any more sentinels being passive flank watchers like Cypher and Killjoy, since those agents already fulfill that niche. However, a trap that is easily avoidable is not something that any hunter would plant. All of the traps in this game require you to invest some type of resource to get past, or those agents have other tools in their kit to safely watch their trap for any potential prey that gets by. Deadlock, on the other hand, has to risk her life to make sure no one can freely pass her traps, which can lead you to dying before you even get to play off your utility. I think the biggest change is that I think Deadlock really should be able to hear footsteps of people shift walking through her sonic sensors. The way to make this work without stepping on Riot's design intent would be one simple thing. The radius in which you'd be able to hear the footsteps should be very small. This means that Deadlock can't get passive info on flanks from far away, like Cypher and Killjoy, since she would have to be right next to the flank to obtain that information. I think this would be really nice for Deadlock, since this lets you play more safely behind cover in more situations if you want to play off your utility. If the enemy doesn't quickly get out of the sensor's area, they'd be at a disadvantage during a gunfight if the stun goes off. And I think this really fits the theme of Deadlock really well as a hunter controlling their territory. Since the enemy can hear the sonic sensors if they walk into it, they know they're walking into dangerous territory where Deadlock might be very close. It would also give Deadlock an avenue to combo with her other utility reliably. You hear footsteps, you can grab net, barrier mesh, or even use annihilation on reaction. The risk would be that you have to play close angles where you could get KO knifed, flashed, mollied, and just rushed. Another nice change would be if GrabNet made an audio cue upon snaring somebody and not just when they took it off. GrabNet isn't a drone, and it doesn't cover a massive area. It's also not rechargeable. A lot of times you have to throw GrabNet from behind cover, and you're not 100% sure if you caught the opponent until they start taking the net off. Because the radius is so big, you don't want to be too close to where you threw it, which makes it pretty difficult to swing off and confirm kills. An audio cue would be so nice to know if you caught somebody without having to play this game of chicken. And now you can follow up with additional utility without having to rely on others to set her up. I'm definitely aware that Valorant is a team game, and duelists want initiators and controllers to help them with entry, and vice versa. However, with most agents, they have strategies that they can employ to be self-sufficient in some way, and they can also create opportunities for themselves to shine individually without just hoping the enemy team makes a mistake. And unless Deadlock gains that, I don't see her getting any better.